with the baby?
Maybe.
I don't know, maybe.
I didn't hear anything, but yes.
Yeah. So, we ready? Okay, let's call this to order, meeting of the Montpelier Planning Commission. The next thing on our agenda is to approve the agenda. Does anyone have anything they'd like to change? Okay, so we can deem that approved. Next is comments from me. I don't have anything. We have a couple things tonight. We're going to have hopefully a new commissioner by the time we meet next time. That's going to be on the agenda at the city council meeting this week. That's all I have to say. So moving on. Do we have any comments from the public about something that's not on the agenda tonight? Is anyone here to make a comment? Okay. So for the next item, we're trying something new. This was Aaron's suggestion this week, was to bump up the approval of the minutes to earlier in the night. See if it's an administrative footnote, right? And go through. So ask everyone to take a look at the minutes if you haven't already. I looked at them earlier. They seem fine to me.
So we don't approve July 15th then, since it was not a quorum?
Yeah, I don't think it needs to be.
Okay. So that was.
Is that right, Mike?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be. I put it out there in case somebody wanted to make a change, they could, but it doesn't have to be voted on.
I was going to move to approve, but I wasn't at one of them, so I won't. I'll let somebody else.
Do we have anyone who did all of them?
I'll move to approve June 24th and July 29th.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. All in favor of approving the agenda for those two dates? Or the minutes for those two dates?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Motion by Barb, second by Marianne.
See, and it's done.
It is done.
All right.
Right, it's
There
right
we
out
go.
of the way that way.
It's so beautiful.
Now you can get out faster. It's right at
I think
7:30.
part of the genius of it might be that we're not in our like over analytical mode yet. By the end of the meeting, we would
Yeah,
be.
that's
maybe.
that's the idea. Everyone wants to switch gears at the end of the night.
Makes us
to-
read them
to
in
look at-
advance
yeah.
too, you know, so.
All right. So the next thing on the agenda is to hear a proposal from Kate Stevenson from the College of Fine Arts about a parcel on Berry Street. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, please come up.
Did you bring any copies?
I brought one copy, but I didn't bring ones for
Okay.
everyone.
All right. Do you want me to
Sorry.
run down and throw them on a photocopier? Will that be a helpful thing to do? Won't take me any time to do it.
Sure.
This is the best? Okay.
Good to
Hey,
see
Mike, there was
everybody.
also this, I don't know if this is gonna be more accurate, because it's got the setbacks and everything.
Yeah, I didn't
This
print
is
that
part-
one because
This is part of your, it was a
That
PDF
was-
attachment.
right,
I don't know
that's,
if this is more accurate or not.
But the issue that we're talking about at this point is just
Okay,
the
gotcha.
boundary line
All right,
adjustment, so.
yeah, I
thanks.
felt like that one was a little easier to read
Gotcha.
than that version, but yeah.
Okay.
So okay, we don't.
Should I dive in or wait for
You can.
Mike?
It's fine.
He
I think
knows.
you could. Yeah, exactly. You can catch us up to where Mike is,
Okay.
and assume that we don't know anything about what you're asking about. So.
Great. So my name's Kate Stevenson. I'm on the team that is working on a design for a 18-acre parcel currently owned by VCFA, adjacent to Sabin's pasture. So the team that we're working on is kind of in the conceptual design phase for the site, but we're looking at two development phases, one for a bathhouse and then another for affordable housing and retail commercial space along Berry Street that would come later on. And the reason that we're here tonight is that in talking with the planning department staff, we were looking at the zoning sections of this parcel, and it's unusual in that there are three zoning districts, in that one parcel. Up at the top, it's kind of mixed-use residential. The middle is residential 24,000, and the bottom is the riverfront district. So we're not looking at doing any development in the top part. It's going to be all in the riverfront district, but the place where we're interested in locating the bathhouse is kind of right on the boundary between residential 24,000. You'll see this when we get the map, and the riverfront. And when we looked at this parcel and the Zorzi parcel, which is adjacent, you can see that the dividing line kind of jogs between these two parcels. So, yeah, pass this around. And in the conversation with staff, that we said, is this fixed? Is there the possibility that we could move the line to basically the dotted line so that it would be matching up with the Zorzi parcel, and it would give us a little bit more flexibility in the site plan and the footprint for the proposed bathhouse. And my understanding from talking with Mike is that this isn't necessarily a planning commission decision, but that we're supposed to go to city council with it. We're on the agenda for Wednesday, but we wanted to come and kind of make sure that you all were in the loop on what we were asking for. And I believe that it would be kind of proposed as like one of the list of the zoning fixes that then go through the hearings in September. So
Yeah, thanks for coming to us.
that's.
So this is all riverfront right now?
Right.
This line?
So the riverfront, allows us to do pretty much anything that we want to do. But obviously, we wouldn't be able to have any commercial use in the current residential 24,000 section.
So what's the proposed use of the bathhouse? Why a bathhouse?
So it's going to be open to the public. It's going to include treatment rooms for things like massage and different natural medicine, but like different pools, a saltwater pool, sauna, kind of a variety of different uses, but with the focus to be kind of public health. Medicinal, right. It's not a spa, it's more of a bathhouse that's meant to serve the community on a regular basis.
So how does that make it different than a spa? I'm just trying to understand.
I think that what we the folks that are planning this are envisioning is it's not like a luxury one time a year you go to the spa, but it's more, you might go on a weekly or bi-weekly basis as part of like a health routine.
But these are not regular swimming pool sizes.
They are not swimming pools.
They are
They're two pools of different temperatures. Hydrotherapy. Yep.
And so this bathhouse, I can't really tell the proportions here, but it's not able to be located, or what's the reason for having it at this spot?
We walked the site, kind of have been doing a lot of site assessment, and felt like that was the best spot to keep it both kind of behind the existing tree line as much as possible, because we're trying to keep it kind of protected from the view shed. And there are some fairly steep slopes in there, and so this is very much of a it's not a final footprint by any means. Like, we're actually probably looking at a couple smaller buildings that are adjacent to each other, different building envelopes, but this is the general location. So yes, it could move in the process of the site design, but we figured it's worth asking if this change is possible.
If they don't have the option, if the zoning line doesn't move.
Right.
What's the slope right there? Do we know? Where is the slope?
I think I have a slopes.
Not that
This
that
one
necessarily dictates what zoning it's in, I'm just.
Has some topo lines on it that
Okay.
you can see, so it does start to get steep kind of further back in there.
The idea is to align it with the topo as it exists. for the most
Yes and
part.
no. I think because of the slopes, we're imagining that some part of it there may, 2-story on the lower part, but maybe 1-story on the upper part. I mean, again, that's part of the site design that we haven't gotten into that level of detail yet.
So it's somewhere in this tree line here.
Yep.
And just a quick question, is that a 20 or 30% slope? Have you guys calculated where the sighting is, what sort of drop-off there is?
Again, we don't know, like, there are 20 to 30% slopes in that area, but the exact footprints, this is just an initial concept.
Okay.
So what's the specific ask?
The specific ask is, to move the divider line between those two zoning districts up, and it's about
Yep.
100
Remove
feet
the
on the
zone
right-hand
line.
side and
Yep.
maybe
Yep.
70 feet on the other side.
And the context here was when, couple things. There aren't very many parcels where the zoning boundary actually goes through the parcel, so this is an exceptional case because of that. And there wasn't any, I don't think, planned reason for why the line is where it is. Is that the recollection, Mike?
Yeah, so in 2017, when the city council was going through to adopt these, the planning commission recommendation was to have the entire VCFA piece be residential 6,000 and the entire Sabins pasture piece to be residential 6,000. And won't get into all the details for why we made that recommendation, but we had the planning commission had its recommendations for why they felt that would be the best way to accomplish the goals. The city council wanted to be more prescriptive about saying this area should be high density and this area should be low density. And so they went through and started to make a couple of proposals, and the first one that came across was I think initially there was one at like 300 or 350, and I think VCFA is at 450 right now. And that continued across into Sabins. Either at the next meeting or something else, the owner of Sabins came in and made some pitches for why that was not good and things should be different. He wanted the entire thing zoned one thing, and the city council came back and chose a different line. They wanted to match it to approximately what was approved by the Trust for Public Lands project. The Trust for Public Lands development on Sabins fits within that. Well, you start to see the start of the box, but it goes across and then back down. So that was at like 550 feet, but they never went back and adjusted Sabins pasture or VCFA. What they wanted for VCFA was development down by the road. They wanted less development in the middle, and then there's another zone up top which is more closely associated with the back of VCFA, which they felt would be mixed use residential, which is the same zoning district as VCFA. So the thought was to break them into three different sections, and but there isn't any magic to why that line was there other than it was
450 feet, was that how it was established the first time?
450 feet from the edge of right away.
And that's where it is right now?
That's where it is, yeah.
Because originally back in November, that center section was going to be called to be mixed residential 17,000.
Yeah.
Right,
That's
and then
yours,
it
but
switched.
in fact it ended up 24,000.
Yeah, because it's the same zoning district as Town Hill. So the Town Hill neighborhood went from 17 to 19 to 21 to 24, or something like that. So it just
The whole
kept
history.
it just kept getting bigger to accommodate the requests of the neighborhood. So when that changed, rather than creating a whole new zoning district for this one piece, we just matched the 17,000 on that map to the Town Hill 24,000.
So what are the options if, let's say that this doesn't get changed, but the project continues? Are you looking at needing a variance or what for this to happen, or is it just impossible?
It wouldn't be possible because it would require a use variance, which isn't allowed under state law. So there wouldn't be any variance option for them to develop that use. They could develop housing in that area, but not the bathhouse.
I have a question. Mike, if the line gets changed, does that change the density that's available on that section closest to Barry Street?
Yes. Yeah, whatever land was calculated before at the old density would be now calculated at the new density.
Are you asking the larger parcel, the riverfront parcel, if that density will be changed by this?
No, I'm asking if
Just
the
the small-
section closest to Barry Street would be available to have increased density as by virtue of the change in the zoning line.
The section that's marked
Yes.
phase 2 on here?
Correct.
That's already riverfront.
Correct. In other
Yeah.
words, if the plan were to change at some point in the future, what would the zoning line change due to the available density of that entire parcel?
Because the parcel gets larger.
Yeah, because that percentage of the parcel gets
Okay.
larger. It always depends how the project moves forward. If phase 2 gets subdivided, then the answer would be no. There wouldn't be any additional that density would be basically lost. But if it remains as a single parcel, then yes, because you have increased the amount of land in the higher density, you would be therefore increasing the amount of possible development that could happen on the overall parcel.
So this
Number of
it's
housing
36
Number of housing units.
3,600 square feet larger, right?
Yes.
And then the entire section is going to be within the.
No, the 3,600 is the footprint of the building.
That's the building. Okay. Do we know? Do we have any way to do some quick math to figure out how much it will affect the density?
Boy, that's funky math.
I know.
Right, I know, it's not a square.
It's not a square.
I was about to start to try to do it, and then I backed up and said, "Would someone else like to do it?"
Somebody else want to volunteer to try to perform that one?
Leadership.
Because it's a good point, but I also like in the whole grand size of this parcel, it seems like
Yeah, I think this parcel
Not
had
a huge amount of
100.
extra?
I think the amount of development. Do you have on yours? Oh, do you have the rest of that
Which one?
report or just that one?
This is the.
Has the memo?
First, your memo.
Does the memo say how many units would be possible on the riverfront portion of DCFA?
It's your memo. I'm gonna let you.
Did you email that out?
No,
that
this
back
was
from
this
2017.
this was what was sent November 1st to City Council.
She really is.
Okay.
Anything with a map, I just stick in the back. And
When
so
City
it's-
Council had questions on which option they could choose, I gave them, I was like, the Planning Commission
Every
recommended this.
option.
Here's option 1, here's option 2, here's option 3, here's option 4. They chose one of them. If you know that's that one. If you guys want to keep talking, I'll
Okay.
see if I can find the
Keith?
number. It's in here. It is in here.
Can I just ask why site the building where it is as opposed to turning it so that it's parallel to Berry Street, which would also make it somewhat parallel to topo lines?
Again,
Why
I would say this is not the footprint of the building. This is showing approximately the area of what 3,600 square feet would look like, but this does not represent the exact location or alignment.
So if the expansion is not to allow for the alignment of the building, then what is the expansion of the riverfront parcel for?
To try and keep all of the building envelope kind of hidden behind the tree line.
So it is generally in that location?
Generally in that location,
Okay.
but
Yeah. I
just
guess-
because this is long and skinny, turn it this way, doesn't necessarily mean.
No, but if it was turned 90 degrees and aligned
Mhm.
with Berry Street, then it would be within the existing parcel. So
Okay.
that's my question.
Right.
So it looks like it's rotated so that it faces the ravine perhaps, or something?
Yeah, definitely trying to get the views,
Okay.
towards Saban's pasture.
Because that is the ravine that it's
Mhm.
against, right?
Oh, is it?
Yeah, there's a drop off. You can see the little squiggly that kind of goes off through Saban's pasture. This is a stream, so this is the low point. So as you're looking this way, it's dropping down to that stream. And the answer to the question, at its existing shape, there are 87 units possible in there. If it got bigger, there would be more potential. I haven't heard numbers being proposed that are in excess of what?
We're talking about up to 40.
Up to 40 units.
Housing
So
units.
whether there's a potential of 87 or whether there's a potential of 94, it doesn't change the ability to ask for an application for 40 units. But at this point, yes, we are just looking at the boundary line. We don't have any applications. We're not reviewing any applications. You know, the staff downstairs doesn't have a recommendation of approving or not approving the bathhouse because we don't have an application yet to compare to the rules. This is just whether we make this area available to place that potential structure.
Go ahead.
Well, I just had like a side note thing, so go ahead, it's fine.
No, I'm just asking, I mean, it seems as if this whole premise to expand the district, which I don't necessarily have a problem with, but is prefaced by the orientation and location of the building, and the general location. And I guess that's what I'm questioning, just that, you know, the further up we put it up the hill makes it less walkable, and it also completely does not orient to Berry Street. So I'm just wondering, you know, if there was other rationale for why it's located where it is, and in fact, not oriented towards Berry Street.
Yeah, I could say that it's mostly been the prospective buyer of the property who's been walking the site. They dowsed it. They, you know, have really been just, it's more about the feel of the location than a specific, you know, and again, like, we're still trying to develop some different concepts for what that footprint looks like. And so this is why that we're coming so early in this process, is just to find out if this is even an option for us as we look at all these different approaches of the driveway and road access, curb cut. There are a lot of different things in play, and so I'm not going to say it couldn't be done lower down.
Yeah.
We're just trying to see like what all the possibilities are.
I guess, I mean, just from the standpoint of keeping it walkable to Berry Street, which I assume it would have a sidewalk or some way of walking from Berry Street that didn't
Right.
require walking in the drive.
Pedestrian access for sure,
Yes.
and not just from Berry Street, but we're also looking at from like the upper part of the parcel and different locations.
It just seems to me that, well, this is just a personal observation, that locating it closer to where the parking is actually located gives it more of a presence on Berry Street.
Yeah, I think we're not looking for a presence on Berry Street. We're
realize
trying to
that.
have it
But
be
the-
private and
But the zoning
hidden.
in the Riverfront District is looking to have presence on Berry Street.
Yeah.
So that's the question, yeah.
Yeah, which
Yeah.
the phase 2 will definitely do, and part of it is also like leaving enough room along Berry Street to be able to really maximize the use of that.
And how was that phase 2 area determined? Was there any kind of a layout that determined that was the space you
Not
needed
yet.
available?
Not yet.
But you have a number of units in mind.
We have a general number of units at this point of a target.
So, just how we should think about it, 'cause I'm concerned about spot zoning issues, and about, I mean, like, where I think our approach to this seems like it should be, do we think that this small section makes more sense as riverfront as envisioned in the zoning, you know, and this specific project and what we're saying, it's interesting to know what's going to happen, and it kind of informs just all of our planning thinking, but I don't think the specifics of the project should lead what we recommend here.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. That's sort of what I was thinking, like, if we're looking at this, but this can change, this doesn't mean it's going to
Yeah.
look like this. So the question isn't what's the project, the question is, does it make sense that this parcel is in multiple zoning districts? It's also, on the map, it's like this little tiny section of 24,000 that seems sort of out of place to me too, so I don't know did you explain that rationale and I missed it? It's like a little blob of tiny 24,000.
Yeah,
It's that whole area.
yeah, it
Yeah,
came
like
down
this-
to
It's just this little piece here.
comments and input from neighbors and abutters and members of the council who were concerned about having, when we recommended residential 6,000 for the entire section, our thought was it's low density all the way up. What would happen is a developer would look at this and go and say, I don't want to run roads and sewer all around here. I'm going to do a planned unit development and I'm going to cluster it by the river, and the top would get left as open space. The city council felt that was leaving too much to risk. They really wanted to make sure that they couldn't say no development in that district. You always have to allow something. So they chose to go with the lowest zoning density possible, which was residential 24,000. I mean, other than rural. There is a rural zoning district, but the rural is supposed to be designated for areas that don't have access to sewer and water. Because it has access to sewer and water, if this got developed, the worst case scenario is it would be developed consistent with Town Hill in that type of manner. So I think the hope was that they would still not have much development, but that was the thought behind why this was the leg that's right behind Sabin Street, and then this section here in the middle would be low density zoning. If it gets developed, it'll be low density zoning, and require riverfront and high density zoning right by the edge of the road.
How many square feet does this change contemplate? If we move-
Did you
Yeah.
determine what?
I don't think we
Yeah,
figured
I don't
it out.
think anyone's done the math to figure it out.
Ballpark, any? I'm just.
Yeah, that's what we were trying to figure out. So
Okay.
100
It's
by.
100
This is
feet on this
140.
side.
Do we know
Yeah.
how long this side is? Roughly.
It's called
It
200.
says, what's the 30 by 120?
That's the white.
Yeah, that's
Oh, that's
the
the
that's the
building?
box. Yeah.
Oh,
It
okay.
looks like maybe 300 by 150 or something.
200, so maybe
Around that.
250.
It almost seems like you can't really look at this small piece of land and say like, this fits in this district or
Yeah.
not, but if it's,
Yeah.
if most of the zoning correlates with property lines, and this is doing that, and so it's not gonna be coming up again, it seems fine to me, that's my,
Yeah.
But it's
that's
not,
my
it's
thinking.
not property lines,
It's not-
regardless of what
oh.
we do, or what was done before. It's not property lines.
It's just zoning
Because the
lines.
property is so big.
Oh, so it's not correlating with property line?
No,
I
it's
thought this-
correlating
Neither
with
of
the
them
zoning
do.
district line of the adjacent.
No, this parcel, that's
Oh,
Berry
okay.
Street down there. This entire parcel is actually 18 acres in size. So
Oh,
it's,
so the
right.
parcel is bigger than that?
yeah, it starts
Yeah.
here and it
Sorry.
goes all the way up
My
behind
misunderstanding.
and goes all the way up to
Okay.
the back of McKinley Street.
Oh, okay.
And so they're just not developing anything up top.
Oh,
So is
okay.
part of that in that rural district also, in 13.8, or it's all,
Here is
it's in this 12.2?
what the king
Right.
for.
Here's
And
the
then
actual
part of
parcel.
this-
If you guys wanna look at a survey,
Oh.
And so
it's
what
kinda small, but that's
was
the
this
actual
line
survey of
bumped up.
what the
This
VCFA
line
land looks
stayed
like.
the same.
So is it in, you said it was in three districts, it's here, here, and up here?
Oh,
Oh,
the
yeah.
front line bumps
Yeah.
up from here.
Yeah, you can kind of see it in
Oh,
here.
okay.
This property.
The outline.
it
So you can
bumped
see,
up,
like,
but
Yeah,
this
so
is what
it's
we're
this-
looking at, so
this
it keeps
edge.
going up
Oh,
even
okay.
this much.
Yeah.
I'm sorry for my
Yeah.
So the,
misunderstanding.
yeah, the
No, we should have
stream
been better
kind of-
about
Yeah, it's
explaining
okay.
the
Okay.
details.
Yeah.
It's all right, Mike. I don't even really
Yeah.
know. You're really stuck
I'm-
on this now.
The
You're
red
I'm-
kind of job.
I was
So
just
this is
Back of the envelope,
Yeah.
complete estimate, all qualifiers out there. If this is 100, then this is approximately 250 going this way. It's going to be less than 100 times 250, which would be 25,000. 25,000 square feet is give or take half an acre.
okay.
Sorry, are you talking about the building?
No.
No,
Okay.
It's like
the change of part, the change of the amount of land is going. It may be
Half acre.
shifting a half an acre. It's probably less than that, but we'll back the envelope, call it a half an acre from 24,000 to riverfront.
So is this adjacent, the parcel next to it that's in Riverfront, that's within Sabins pasture, this this corner here? Is
Yes.
there a reason that that's different, but then
So
it just
that
stops?
whole-
Is that because of the development potential of
And
sewer and water?
for anyone who can see the screen,
Sorry.
the orange, you see there's a little orange piece, and then there's a green piece that has the 13-8.
Right, so that's the
So
rural.
yep, if you add the 13.8 plus that little notch of orange, that is Sabins pasture. So Sabins pasture is about 100 acres. 85 acres going across is the green piece, which is all rural.
Thanks, appreciate it.
The
We'd have
little
to
orange
have
piece
one,
is
yeah.
about 15 acres of riverfront.
Okay.
That 15 acres of riverfront is the piece that roughly outlines the Trust for Public Lands project that was approved in 2008 in Act 250. It was never built, never moved forward on, but it was approved and was agreed upon by the Trust for Public Lands in cooperation, trying to negotiate with the Save Sabins Pasture group, whatever it is. So that's why that line has a little bit of basis to it. There was a reason why that was picked, just because it approximately allowed for that project to be recreated if somebody ever steps forward to recreate the Trust for Public Lands.
That still sort of feels like spot zoning too, right? To just say, well, we have this project, which is sort of what we're contemplating now. We have this project, therefore let's change the zoning, and then we.
I
don't
think
even
a
know if the
legal way
project
to frame
happens.
it would
Yeah.
be there's no project that's being proposed, but there's a potential one, and we're being asked to reconsider what our thinking is about the zoning and the future of this parcel, and just thinking of it in the abstract and whether we want to revisit it.
And does that include a recommendation to the city council?
Potentially.
Potentially, well, that's what we're trying to decide what if we'll do that or not. And I mean, I think that we don't seem to have strong opinions, so it's possible that we could. I think it's possible to inform city council that we're neutral about it. That
Is there a place for public opinion or public comment?
for here or at city council, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Would you like to?
I would.
Okay, come on up. You can introduce yourself.
Sure.
Yeah. Like, again, we don't have a motion or anything on the table right now, so it's
Okay.
this is
Well,
it's great.
that's
It's great to
okay.
hear.
I'm happy
Yeah.
to do what I can to add to the conversation. My name is Jeff Rubin. I'm the property owner on Barry Street to the west of the subject property. So, let's see, one of the houses just on the corner of the big map.
Within Riverfront?
Yes, he's within
Yes.
riverfront.
So, I would request that the planning board consider this perspective. The current way the zoning lines are drawn came about as a process, as I understand it. It started at 300 feet from the center line of Barry Street, and then the current or prior owner of the property petitioned for it to go to 450. I believe the same time that the zoning was being considered, the owners at Sabins Pasture also had various reasons that they presented their case for 550 from the center line, 550 feet from the center line on Barry Street. So I think that because we don't have a particular project in front of us, and because Kate actually stated that, you know, it would be a good idea to maximize Barry Street, and they don't have a specific number of units, I would urge the planning board to recommend to the city council that the zoning line should stay where it is.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Does anyone else have any thoughts? Aaron, did you?
Sorry.
You go ahead.
I'm just trying to figure out what the context is, because I'm not comfortable changing it without understanding why it's there and understanding all of the context, which is why I'm asking questions about all this.
And a lot of the context with, a lot of the zoning was done here with the planning commission, but this is one where the city council kind of took over the decision making.
At a public hearing.
And it had a public hearing, and it was a more sensitive area, and it's something that we weren't as heavily involved in, which to me is a reason to defer to the city council, since the city council had a vision here that was sort of, I guess it was different than what the planning commission had at the time, because they made changes.
And I'd just like to make a quick public comment too.
Sure.
Many of you already know me. My name's Joe Castellano. I live at 3 Sabin Street. If you look at the big blow-up, I am the second house in on Sabin Street. I do want to thank Kate for showing up, and I also want to thank, we had a preliminary meeting with both the developer and Kate and some other people early on, and they've been very cooperative and, you know, very easy to work with. My main concern about changing the zoning is, right now with the current setbacks or everything, it goes up just a little past my house, and with the proposed zoning changes, you know, it looks to me like pretty much almost half of Sabin Street, or most of the butters on Sabin Street, are going to be impacted, as opposed to just 2 property owners at this point. So I kind of am concurring with Jeff Rubin that I would like to kind of keep it the same.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Do we have any other thoughts? Does anyone have a motion?
I was going to say the basis that we had was really in the memo that Barb had, which was really, I just gave them 4 options,
Yeah.
just because they didn't know what they wanted to do with it. So I gave them 4 options, and they.
But did the final option actually end up being one of your 4?
No, they
No.
didn't pick any of your.
No,
four.
they didn't pick any of them, which is how we ended up with a map with the 550 on the one line and the 450 on the other.
Right, because
Yeah.
originally it was 450 all the way across.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's why the city council is much more familiar with what their logic and thinking was than we are.
But the city council is
Right.
Or lack thereof. It was more
Because
sausage
something
making than
else.
anything else, I think, would be.
Yeah, I feel comfortable referring to the city council. I don't know if we need to make a formal motion, but seems to make the most sense to me. But thanks for, I learned a lot. Thank you.
Mike, would you feel better with the motion, since you're going to have to go to report? Or
Nope. The only thing, so there were 2. One was whether you guys wanted to put any support or opposition to the change, and the other one was whether you think this is a substantial change to the zoning, or whether.
So there was. Okay.
I think it's about a half an acre. I don't feel strongly that it's substantial. I don't know. I mean,
Do we have a definition or rule or statute?
we pulled up the statute, and I try to pull that back up.
Yeah, and really the impact of if it's substantial, I mean there are two options. If it's reaches a certain point, then there could be hearings. Well, there are going to be hearings. Or whatever happens Wednesday is just making recommendations for what is in the city council's public hearing draft, and the public hearing is set for September 11th and 25th. Yes.
And that would be our public hearing?
Their public hearing.
Their public.
Their public hearing. So that would be theirs. If this is a substantial change, then they'll have to. Then it would have to come back, and if you guys are okay, Kirby and I can amend the required report to reflect this change. And I think that's
A lot of it's like taking.
yeah.
a
Some
while
of this
to
is
get
just
in.
some of this is stuff that we would usually gloss over, but in certain cases it makes sense to really get down to the nitty gritty of what specifically it says in 4442.
So yeah, 24 VSA 4442 sub B about an amendment of a proposal. It says the legislative body may make minor, and this is to be the legislative body of the city, so city council, may make minor changes to the proposed bylaw amendment or repeal, in this case, the regulation or the zoning regs, but shall not do so less than 14 days prior to the final public hearing. And this is the part that we're trying to understand here. It says, if the legislative body at any time makes substantial changes in the concept, meaning, or extent of the proposed bylaw amendment or repeal, it shall warn a new public hearing. In this case, Mike, though, isn't this about? Is this before a regulation?
Yeah, we haven't. Yeah, so we haven't had a public hearing. So the first piece doesn't matter. It's the second piece of that clause.
But does it
Because we
define
haven't warned the
substantial?
public. We haven't had a public hearing yet. Had we already had our first public hearing, it could necessitate us going back and rewarning another first public hearing. But we haven't had a first public hearing. So read the second half of the sentence.
If the legislative body at any time makes substantial changes in the concept, meaning, or extent of the proposed bylaw amendment or repeal, it shall warn a new public hearing or hearings under subsection A of this section. So your question is the notice that's already been given, is it good enough for this if we decide to throw this in halfway through?
Isn't there another sentence after that?
If any part of the proposal is changed, the legislative body at least 10 days prior to the hearing shall file a copy of the changed proposal with the clerk or of the municipality and with the planning commission.
And the planning commission.
Planning commission shall amend the report prepared pursuant to subsection 4441C of this title to reflect the changes made by the legislative body and shall submit that amended report to the legislative body at or prior to the public hearing.
It's only if a substantial change has been
Yeah.
determined.
So
Does it-
yeah,
does
it's
it identify what a substantial change is?
It doesn't. It doesn't. But the fact that they've come in and talked to you, if you've got enough information given to Kirby, if the city council agrees on Wednesday to make this change, then it goes into the warrant document. Comes back to us to rewrite the required report to reflect the fact that there's approximately a quarter-acre change in the zoning district line. And then we have to refile that required report back to city council. So they're here 2 days early rather than 12 days afterwards, because if we waited 12 days for us to do the required report in this planning commission meeting, then we'd miss the deadlines and have to start warning different warning schedules. So it just works better if we've got an idea of, and really all the required report's going to do is say what's the impact. We're jumping through legal hurdles, but it was just to make sure if you guys think it's substantial, then we will definitely be coming back.
So are we gonna have to vote on whether it's substantial or not? No.
No, it's just a matter of what to do next.
But we can make two recommendations to the city council, it sounds like. One, we can make a recommendation as to whether or not this constitutes a substantial change. Number two is it sounds like the recommendation that we could make is whether we approve the city council placing this on its agenda for a public hearing. Because that's the next step, right? That's what's discussed on Wednesday.
Yeah, technically, well, you would
So we wouldn't even
you would support it being on the change.
on
yeah.
the right, just on the at the public.
I say better be safe than sorry and treat it as a substantial change. Actually, it's my thinking.
Yep.
Why be vulnerable? And we're talking about a section of the city that's controversial and zoning.
So we've got substantial change, and do you want to have a vote on being neutral, supporting?
Well, I think I'd like to make a motion as to whether to motion to determine whether or not this is a substantial change or not, and if we report whether or not it's a substantial change to the city council. It's not a good wording for the motion, but.
So your motion is.
The motion- the
vote on
motion is-
whether we consider it a substantial change.
Correct.
First.
Yes.
So we have a
Um,
motion.
Could we phrase it as we don't know but suggest treating it as a substantial change? That would be the motion I would be in favor of saying.
What? The motion is.
I don't think we're required to declare that it's a substantial change or not. It's just whether or not the procedure should be followed. It's a little bit of.
I make a motion to decide whether or not we are going to make a recommendation to the city council as to whether or not this is a substantial change or not.
But then your motion is to decide.
Is to decide whether to make a recommendation to the city council regarding the substantial change determination.
Okay. So we can discuss that. Is there any discussion?
It's a confusing process.
Yeah.
That's the discussion.
I think fundamentally that what's been determined is we can make a recommendation, but we're not required to. So I mean, it's just sort of a threshold question as to whether or not we even want to make that recommendation to the city council.
I don't know, I guess my only thought is that if we, yeah, I mean, I guess I'm probably inclined to what you said, to follow the process, to be careful, but if we declare it to be a substantial change or not, are we setting precedent for other things that may come up that we want to have flexibility about, or, I don't know, development is so, tricky, and I just want to be able to have some flexibility about how the city changes, and I don't know.
I don't feel great about making a legal interpretation when we haven't really researched any case law, or we haven't really given it the proper background. That's why.
All right, how about we have a motion to recommend to council to treat this request as a substantial change and to move forward with the process of amending the required report.
So we are determining then that it is a substantial
Well, we're
change.
not saying it is. We're just recommending to council to treat this request as a substantial change. We're not saying it is a substantial change. We're just saying we don't know, so we might as well treat it as the worst case scenario, which is a substantial change,
That's a different motion than what I.
and to move forward with the process of amending the required report.
That is different. So
That would
for-
be a different.
That's a
Yeah.
different
So
motion.
what Aaron's asking is whether we're going to make any recommendation at all on
Right.
this issue.
This is just a question of whether or not we're going to make a recommendation. Emphasis on recommendation. Not a determination.
Does anyone have thoughts, or do we want to vote on that?
Do we have a second?
We don't have a second.
Do we have a second? I don't know if people are interested.
Enthusiasm.
Thanks for making us have the discussion.
Yes.
Okay, can you read I would move, I think, what you proposed. Can you just
So it was
read it again?
a motion to recommend to council to treat this request as a substantial change and to move forward with the process of amending the required report.
Yes, I would.
So, would they amending the report means that they would be doing that if they were agreeing to make this change? So does that,
We would be amending the required
right,
report.
so does that motion say that we're recommending they approve this change?
Treat the
Or
request as a
just that
substantial
we're
change.
considering
And
it
if,
substantial?
all right, so then what if there was, treat this request as a substantial change, and if approved,
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
thank you, that's better.
Good call.
Because I don't want I'm not comfortable
To
making
move-
this change. I'm happy, I think that they should have the discussion. I have no problem with the proposed design specifically, I just don't know that that's a reason to make this change. So I think city council needs to discuss it, so I'm not comfortable telling them that they
We
should
have-
or should not do it.
yeah.
That
So
we
this would
agree
just
to
be
don't.
Or that we agree
this
or
would
don't
just be
agree.
a motion of almost a formality to let them know that our recommendation is to assume this is a substantial change, we'll move forward with that process, and separate from that, the planning commission doesn't have a recommendation one way or the other, unless after we approve this or don't approve this, we have a second motion. So,
So I will
Diane.
move that motion as amended by Stephanie.
I will second.
Okay, so all those in favor of the motion as recorded by Mike, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
1, 2, 3. We get
Yeah.
aye?
Yeah, I don't,
4.
yeah,
Okay.
I shouldn't have said aye, because I don't vote unless I need to, right?
Well, you had to in this one.
Oh, to get
4 to 1.
to get 4, yep.
All right. Any other motions? Or are we done?
Do we have any other motion? Do we have a recommendation? I think we discussed earlier that we don't even necessarily need
Don't need
a
to.
motion if we have no recommendation. No recommendation otherwise? Okay, so I guess we're done.
All right.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you, everyone who came in
Thank you.
to inform.
Yeah, you're very
Yeah.
deliberative.
Sometimes.
Yes, we are.
Right.
We can't be accused of skimming it.
We don't rush things.
Okay, well, moving on the agenda then, we can get into the discussion of the boundary for a design review district. So, last meeting, we talked about what our suggestions would be to change what the Historic Preservation Committee and also the Design Review
I'm
Committee.
sorry, did we skip number 7?
Oh, we did skip number 7. Thanks, Aaron. So there's an item on here to continue review of the proposed design review standards. My understanding is our plan was to wait to hear back from Historic Preservation about our suggestions, and then we will kind of officially get the regs at that point. We get another bite at that apple, and then it will go to City Council. So until that we hear back from them, I don't think we have any more to discuss.
Because we had made our recommendations for changes.
Yeah, we had a vote last time, so, but if anyone has anything left over from that, I guess, I mean, it's on the agenda, so do we have any comments about that? Okay, so I'll move on to you now. So the boundary. So in the context of what we did last time, we need to decide what our initial preliminary kind of recommendation for a boundary will be. That's really important, though, to highlight that this is a preliminary thing because we're going to have public hearings. We're going to hear from people. So there's going to be plenty of input from here. But basically, what do we want as our starting place for what this design review boundary is going to be? And with that, I can hand it to Mike with an intro of things to consider.
Keep going.
4 more.
You can hand out these other ones.
2, 3. So this was I had just made a bunch of maps, and some of them say the same thing in different ways. So
There's another one.
Oh, there is. Oh.
I'm just gonna.
Thank you. I did ask for all the maps, so I think this might have been.
Oh, 27.
Is there?
I think so.
Are you
I'm gonna scoot over.
Commissioner Blakely? Did you want to come sit up here and be part of this?
Yeah.
I don't
Well,
mind that.
what-
Yeah.
Your dad, you're back
Yeah,
there.
we've got
Got the room.
the room. So, I'll start with this one. So just by way of orienting everybody, this is probably the nice first one to start to look at. The blue line, the light blue line that goes around, is our existing design control district. What you see in red is our current historic district. Our historic district also includes the Capitol complex, so that white donut actually is part of the historic district as well.
So is that for the historic district for the designated downtown?
This is the
What's
historic
context?
district for the National Register.
The National Register. Okay.
This is the design control district, and the third line, just because, as I said, nothing seems to line up.
Is that third line?
There was that one.
Oh.
There we go.
Oh.
So, This one I printed out because of the dark blue. What you see here, the dark blue on the top and the bottom, which tends to blend into the river a little bit, but that's the designated downtown. So at a minimum, design review must cover this dark blue area. Now, I didn't have a map that had the dark blue and the National Register and the design control, but it
they
helps
don't
to
want-
give you an idea. This was the minimum that
So
we have to cover, which is
Why do we have to?
part of
For the designated
for the
downtown.
designated downtown.
the
You would-
adopted, part of the adopted
Oh,
does
then-
conform with the designated downtown. right?
Part of it does, yes. This nose that sticks out
Knows,
here
yeah.
does match the designated downtown.
That's
But-
something
Oh,
it
but
looks
that's
like
not
we
in
have
it.
to,
But as it goes
National
up,
Register.
it gets different. And
Okay, so the current blue line, it has the entire designated downtown in it,
yes,
but it does not line up with the National Register.
yep. And it doesn't really match it only matches the designated downtown on Berry Street. After it leaves Berry Street, it doesn't match anything. And then you can see the rest of these lines. And this is where we were talking, especially if you're talking about like Liberty Street and some of these other Loomis and Liberty, some of these streets up here that are in the National Register Historic District but are not in the design review right now. Those are the areas that we had issues when we proposed changes, because we were going to redraw the blue line to match the red, which is why this map exists. This map was created to make that argument that this blue line should match the red, and we'll regulate the red as design control. And we got taken to task on that. And then if you look really carefully, there are a couple of spots where there are even some parcels that are not in the National Register, but are in the designated downtown, or in the design control. So really where we're at now is, where do we want to, what do we want to think about?
So the National Register, my understanding is anything we do about deciding what this design review boundary is going to be doesn't directly impact the National Register. So the National Register is sort of more informative of what's seen as historical from that one perspective, right? Like, if ours doesn't line up, it's not going to hurt anything.
Kinda. So, just to keep things, I'll keep throwing things out, and at some point everybody will go and say, "That's enough. I've got enough. I'm all full."
All right.
No, we're on
So
all the
we are a
internet.
designated downtown, which means we have to enforce this. I've already mentioned that.
Yep.
We are also a certified local government, a CLG, which is for historic preservation. As a part of CLG, you are also expected to have regulations to protect historic structures in your community. We kind of do that in some places of our historic district, but not all of it. Now, I haven't heard from them that they will threaten to throw us out of CLG for not meeting all of the National Register.
Because we don't right now.
Because we don't right now, but I've heard comments from them, so we may at some point hear from somebody from Devon or somebody who says that we should be, or we're expected to, or you can be stripped of your CLG for not protecting all of these ones out here. I don't know what they're gonna say, but that's just a piece of information that's still floating out there, because they'll come in and tell us, well, you can't make the design review smaller because then you're not protecting the historic structures and we're going to throw you out. And I'm like, but we already aren't. So I don't know.
So we don't know if we should be.
We don't know. They haven't.
Or we're
but
not
that, I mean,
asking
if we
because
have
that's gonna be part of the process.
That would be part of the
Decide
process,
to-
but it is one of these ones that, I
Yeah.
mean, part of the uber philosophical thing is, well, one of the best ways to protect your historic resources is by regulations, and we should match the design control boundary to match our historic, so that way we're we've got an inventory of the historic resource. We should protect those items that are on the historic resource. But once you reach the political realities of these are a lot of single-family homes, and we're starting to get in on, people who are commercial have access to tax credits. People who are single-family residential do not have access to tax credits, and therefore it's a different burden for them than for the commercial people when we say you have to maintain the historic integrity of this building. You have to maintain the slate roof that's needs to be replaced.
Mike, can I take a step back? Let's start with the easy parts that are currently included in the design control district that we can't actually justify. For example, the area around the college, currently it's in the design control district. Do we actually have any say as a city?
Small amounts. Yes. And it's a matter of discussion between different things. Meredith is my zoning administrator. Our zoning administrator is much more of the opinion that we can be regulating more. The limitations on zoning, the 4413 limitations that are in there, are really a set of things that we can and can't regulate, and we can regulate more than, I'm typically saying that we can't regulate the college, and she's of an opinion we can regulate more than
Some of the college.
Yeah, we can regulate some of the college. They get some leniency, not full leniency. How's that? So it could make sense, but at the same time, I think it's a policy thing. It's kind of strange to have the island sitting out here, but
Yeah.
CCV is not on this map. It's also CCV way out in Elm Street is also a parcel. If you want to talk about spot zoning, there it is, just the
Because
college.
it has a different zoning district.
They put both colleges, when it was Woodbury College and
Mhm.
maybe Woodbury and whatever, but Norwich, then they put them both in.
Who made that decision?
Planning Commission and City Council a long time ago.
So we could change it.
Yeah, we could go and recommend that CCV should no longer be in a design review district. It's not historic. CCV certainly isn't.
Right, and National Life. is
In
another-
National Life.
And
And that's where it comes back to the discussion of, okay, well, we've got those, those written purpose statements of what we're trying to do, and where does it make sense for us to draw that line?
Well, the new language is very historic focused, and not just a design control. But
It's a
really
heavier weight put on historic.
And as currently drawn, the design control district includes the parcel we were just discussing.
This is an old map. At that same DRB, or at that same city council public hearing, where they made those lines, they also adjusted they took this piece
Oh, they
out
did take it
of
out.
design review, but the top part of that parcel is still in design review. Because at the time, VCFA was thinking, we're gonna subdivide the parcel, we'll keep that upper piece and we'll sell this bottom piece. After that, they went through and just put the entire piece on the market without subdividing, and the people who came in tonight have a purchase and sale for the entire parcel.
So that currently is not in.
It's not in design
Design.
review. No.
But the top half still is.
The
They're
top,
buying
the
whole
top little piece is, yep.
I'm confused by the changing zoning because someone's planning to do something that they don't actually do thing. Because that's come up a couple times tonight. That's another example of we changed something.
But it makes a difference between what's possible and what's not possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
In some cases it's, and in the case when the proposals came in, there weren't proposals for either one of these parcels when city council was debating them. They just made a decision on November 1st about both of these parcels, and then 2 weeks later on November 15th, they came back in and Doug Zorzi came in and made a big argument for Sabins, so they changed Sabins again, and so then they didn't match. But it's arbitrary and arbitrary.
Right, okay.
We recommended something different.
Yeah. So what are our thoughts on a starting place? The obvious one, of course, is the downtown. I'm going to start getting these different designations mixed up.
Designated downtown.
The designated downtown is where we could start. One option would be to put over top of that the red on this one, right?
The National Register boundary. Yep.
Put the designated downtown on that one. 'Cause it's
One on
not-
top of the other.
Yeah,
So that everything in each one's included, and I mean that's one.
Yeah.
I don't see a reason for us to go with the design control as it is now, but that is an option. But
The other option, there was another set of maps that went around the zoning map,
yep.
which is really kind of small, but I kind of sent it out just because in all of this hodgepodge of stuff, you can see the black outline of the design control district, so you have something to start to reference. We can also use, we've got this, but we also have neighborhoods identified on this map, and we also have zoning districts on this map. So we could go through and start to add in, to go through and say, well, if we're gonna stop it, let's stop this one. We'll take the mixed use and the urban and the riverfront, and we'll make those, that type of thing, where we pick certain things to go through and say, these neighborhoods should be part of design review. And kind of add them in. That's just another option.
That could be then expanding beyond the historic district. Then, because some of the neighborhoods,
It could be smaller than, it could be larger than, it depends really where you pick and choose. It could end up being a reason why Liberty and Loomis don't end up in, because we say neighborhood, you can see on this,
10,
on this
9,
map, you have the little
10,
green 8.3, and then you have a little 9-3. If we say 8-3 is going to be regulated as part of design control, 9-3 is not that neighborhood, then
but right now 9-3 is part of the historic district. It's not, and
No, it's not.
yeah.
9-3 is not.
It's not.
Up to Graham Terrace?
No. 9-3 is not. Part of 8-3 is.
It's part of the historic.
Well, you can
historic
see the
district
black
is
line
on
is
there.
on the map.
No, yeah, I'm talking about the historic district.
Oh, the historic district,
Yes.
yes. They are
Yes.
both in the historic. So if you were to look at this map, 8-3 and 9-3 are both in the historic district, as well as a big chunk of 10-2 is also in the historic district. Well, a chunk, maybe not a big chunk.
A
Well,
relatively small chunk.
no,
actually.
because those are actually part of 7-1, aren't they? Or
Yeah.
7-6.
So I think 10-2 is
10-2 is probably out.
outside.
But it
anyway,
gives us another thing. If we want
Yeah,
to
we
not
could
be
over-
arbitrary, we
yeah,
can
we
go
could-
through and say, pick this neighborhood, pick this neighborhood, pick this neighborhood. In the neighborhood description, they would probably say they're historic, and we can just go through and say, well,
Does the
Do we want to make an overlay then to show that? I
well,
mean,
you can give me some ideas. I can go back, draw some lines, and then maybe have the RPC put together a map that says, here are the neighborhoods that you told me to pick, here's the existing designated downtown, and here's the existing historic district. You basically take this map and put some other information on it for you.
Okay.
does the current designated downtown split any of our zoning neighborhoods?
I
Right
think it
now?
does. Yeah.
That's one idea to go along with kind of what Mike's trying to say, is to make sure our neighborhoods stick together and they're treated as units, is to take the designated downtown, but then expand it a little bit to make sure that every neighborhood that it touches is fully included.
Well,
We
it's
could
sort
just
of
say
like we
not.
have these.
Cause I don't know what that would be.
Yeah, it's hard to,
Yeah. I don't think it would expand it a lot, but
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, I guess my desire would just be to keep it to the downtown, designated downtown. But I'm sure other people have different opinions. And I just wonder how cohesive people feel. I mean, people are gonna feel, it's possible that people feel pissed. At some point you're gonna draw a line between neighbors, and I don't know how cohesive people feel about their neighborhoods. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but
Depends what's going on.
yeah.
Nobody wants it until somebody proposes something, and then people want it because they want to beat up their neighbors with it.
I mean, it still seems sort of crazy to have these historic design district, but not have it reviewed. So we've got a significant amount of the historic district not under design control, or design review.
And we can certainly put together a couple of maps, because I think the sense was we were going to come up with an idea or some ideas that we can go to the public to start putting out feelers for, to see what, and your thought might be, well, let's go bigger. Let's try to include more of the historic. We're trying to protect the historic resources. Let's include more of the historic resources. Ariane might be like, well, let's keep it smaller and really focus on the downtown core and what's important and what we have to protect. And we can hear from the public on where they want. I mean, there are advantages and disadvantages both ways.
So what's the point of having some areas designated in the historic district if they're not under design review? If they're residential? It's part of the National Register. It's just a survey of what's out there, and it's purely information. Here's the information. Do with it what you want, and you might choose a subset of those to protect. You might protect them all. It's just information at this point.
one thing is that residential could become commercial. I mean, so just because it's currently residential doesn't mean that it's useless to be in that district.
No, but if it's mostly single or, one or two family homes, it's unlikely that it's gonna suddenly become commercial.
Yeah, we can look at, and the zoning districts will give you what the possible uses are. It won't tell you what is on the ground, but in a lot of cases we did try to match them. So you do have some mixed use residential MUR 7-7, but these 8-2 and 8-3 are residential 1500. So those are just residential. There's no commercial in those, other than commercial apartments. But there's no commercial development in those.
I'm thinking about apartments. I feel like
Yeah.
apartments make use of the credits a lot, right?
Yeah, in some cases they do. So I mean, we could just start looking at the greens, the oranges, and the reds. Really kind of make up a core of, and this blue 2-1, which is its own unique piece. Kind of make up their own.
And most of those are in the district. Well, yeah. Also 9-3. Yeah, I mean, I think if we outlined a lot of our district boundaries already do match the historic boundaries.
Oh, I
Like
see.
the
Yeah,
rest
they're
of 7-1.
fairly close. Yeah.
I mean, 9-3,
Down State Street,
7-6.
I mean, one advantage is that the new map, this was a revised map in 2016, so this revised map follows parcel lines. Our zoning districts follow parcel lines, so if they look kind of close, chances are good they're actually the same. So,
are you saying that this is not the one that, this is not the full historic
That is the
district?
full historic
It
district,
is?
yeah.
Okay, all right. So, and includes Cliff Street?
Yes, you will see the squigglies up here for
Yes.
Cliff Street.
Yeah.
This blue line is actually, you're mentioning it, yes, the blue line here is actually wrong for this because they asked to get cut out. So if you were to look at this map here, you'd follow the,
But
when they went to city council, they got that cut out, but it is in the National Register district.
they asked to get cut out of design.
And they got cut out of design review at the request of the property owners.
But it was open to reinterpretation by the council.
The council did say they were open to putting it back in.
We might not wanna argue that.
Yeah, you pick your battles
Pick
carefully.
your battles, exactly, yeah.
We will be opening up those walls and filling it with Cliff Street residents. But again, that could, if we were looking at, where the neighborhoods are, that's a light blue neighborhood, which is just residential. That was cut out already.
Mike, previously, when we did propose that the design review should match the historic district, other than Cliff Street, was there objection from other neighborhoods?
Yes, there was quite a lot from, I always mix up my Liberties and Loomis, I think it's Loomis. Sandy Vitsume,
Didn't
spoke
wanna be
very,
Didn't want to be part of the
did
design
not want to be in it.
Here it is.
I mean, I imagine we're gonna get some strong feelings from anyone if we're trying to increase. We're likely to face some sort of.
Yeah, I mean, I think if there was a subtle push that went through and said, look, half of this neighborhood is currently design review, we're gonna make the whole thing design review, and, I think there may be some grousing and grumbling, but I think at a certain point,
That's more of a fairness thing.
that's more of a
That was
fairness
part of
thing to
what
go
was
through and
brought
say,
up
we
before.
don't want an arbitrary line, we decided to match it to the neighborhoods, either your whole neighborhood is in, or your whole neighborhood is not gonna be in. And
So
we-
right now, Cliff 11-1, all of that is out right now. Okay, so that already now with that cutout matches.
Yes,
the zoning
with a
districts.
teeny tiny exception, but
Yeah.
we don't need to get into
We
that.
won't
That's
get into that.
because of this little one parcel. They had requested back when the designated downtown was made, these guys wanted access to historic tax credits, so they could renovate one Cliff Street, whatever, the first house on Cliff Street.
Because it's on the designated downtown instead.
And because it was in designated downtown, they were able to get access, so they petitioned and they ran the designated downtown up to loop them in, even though they're really not
This is
a designated
bunch of
downtown. That's
mess
a,
all over the place.
yeah.
Okay,
So
great.
that was a little.
Okay.
I think we could think about this strategically in that if we're going to put something out there for people to think about and give us their opinion on, if we first throw out a small area, people might think that they're not included, so we might not hear from them. So then if we expand it later, that could lead to trouble. We could also throw out something bigger just to get all of the feedback possible and then trim it down. I mean, I'm not saying
And I
proposing
think we have to have a
anything,
rationale for
but
whatever we propose, and
It's
so.
gonna determine our future, which of those two we use.
It would really help to maybe have those neighborhoods identified as an overlay, Mike, so that we have some rationale for what we might choose. So is it possible to overlay those?
Yeah, I can.
neighborhoods on
I
the
just kind of
red
gave you
blue
a
map?
scatter
Yeah.
shot of
Right, no, it's great.
ideas,
Yeah,
and then I can go back and try to pull in some additional maps that go and say, boy, I kind of like that idea of matching our design control to neighborhoods, and if that's the thing, then I can go through and match it up to neighborhoods and say, these are all the commercial and or mixed-use neighborhoods in the downtown, and then put an outline of where here's the current design review, here's the designated downtown, and here's
with the zoning.
here's the National Register line, and you'll kind of have an idea of, oh, all right, it's leaving out this neighborhood, and it's leaving out this neighborhood, and leaving out this neighborhood, but it's captured the core of who we really would want to regulate in design review.
Mike, can you tell me what the criteria are for National Registration? Designation.
I am not an expert. I will give you a general understanding of it. So there are two sets. There is the individual structures, and then there are districts. This is Montpelier's historic district, which includes a couple hundred buildings. Individual things can also be added in. But you have to be a minimum of 50 years old. I mean, at the time it was passed in 76, maybe? So it was like basically 50 years was getting us back to anything before the 20s, yeah. So those buildings built in the 20s are all historic. Well, now my Prairie Ranch built in 1971 is coming into being a historic structure because they didn't anything fit more than 50 years old. So it qualifies as historic, and then it depends whether it continues to have its
Yeah, so not
defining
all
features.
structures are historic in it. Somebody just creates a line, but not all structures are.
Yes,
They're evaluated though.
Yes.
They're within the historic district, they're evaluated as either contributing or
contributing or non-contributing.
non-contributing.
And who makes that decision?
That was done by the professional. That was done by the consultant who did the register. Now the register is
But
designed
for the city.
For the city.
Yeah.
For the city. Yeah.
No, it's just distinguishing. It's not a federal decision.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, they put together the documentation. It gets sent to the feds. The feds approve it. So they do have a review process for it. But how the district kind of differs from the individual is the district is intended to capture a whole bunch of things of a certain period. So most communities will have, within an area this size, might have, I live in Hardwick. I think the village of Hardwick has 4 historic districts. Because this group was built in the 1840s, this was the 1860s to 1890s, these were all the ones built in 1910, and these were the ones that were built, and they were separate historic districts because they followed different architectural styles. Most of downtown Montpelier, according to this survey, falls into the same development pattern. I'm guessing maybe because we had a big habit of burning down our downtown on a periodic basis. And so therefore we don't have 1840s buildings in our downtown because they were burned down in 1860, which were then burned down in 1880, which were then burned down in 1910. So that's my guess
that was
why we have a
helpful,
big
thanks.
historic district.
We never
A
had it.
big single historic
That's what
district.
he talked about, is that it could have been broken up into
Yeah.
separate districts, which is more typical.
Yeah, more typical that, but I think
Hasn't been.
ours wasn't, yeah.
If we go through the process of breaking out design review from historic preservation review, we could have 2 different districts with 2 different rules apply. There's nothing stopping us, right?
Well, there's no zoning rules with the National Historic District. That's
No.
just, yeah.
I think just because you're just saying because the current update to the regulations that you guys looked at the last meeting that I missed, but that's very specific to historic. So there are other things in here that might have
Well,
other design review, but that
What we looked at
Separate.
it had subsections on, it had some sections that were on just general design review,
Yeah.
and some that were historic specific. So we could break those out and have 2 sets of regs that apply to, and we had 2 maps, 1 set of regs apply to one set of regs apply to the other. If we want either historic or design review, one or the other to be larger than the other.
so like the design review would be a larger line, and the historic would be within, like as a subset of that larger. I guess it doesn't.
Or there could be, or you could do one which has slightly less strict standards. You could have a
Well,
very,
But-
a much stricter set of rules that apply to the commercial district and have a softer set of standards or less or not all of the standards. You know, standards 1 through 10 apply in the downtown, and 1 through 4 apply in this other district.
And if we, I should throw that out there, if we get to a place where where there's not a lot of agreement about how the boundaries should be set out, then we could go that way.
Can I just ask a process question? You know, you mentioned if we did the downtown designation and people thought they were left out and then they got added back in later, they might be upset, but would people get notified if they're added back in later at all, or?
The point I was making is if we throw something out there for the public to look at and to come comment on, if we then expand it later,
Right, right.
people say, hey, I didn't get
Yeah,
a chance
that's
to,
trouble.
you know, so
Oh,
that's.
yeah, I guess my question
Yeah.
was, yeah, exactly that. If we expand it later, when would that happen? Like, how quickly would that happen? And would it be like? I guess people wouldn't get notified. I'm just not understanding the process of how
Once
that.
they would get notified, but.
They would get
yeah,
notified
But
if
I
it was-
think
But
it's,
in
it would be
time, that
better to
makes a comment.
start, yeah, with the bigger one, and then if that causes difficulty, to shrink it down.
So then I guess my next question would be the CLG process. Is the Division of Historic Preservation the one who determines, ultimately approves that?
Yeah, they will see whatever map we draw. So, again, like I said, I look at this and go and say, we're already not regulating a bunch of these, but I'm waiting to hear what their comment will be based on whatever we draw for a line. So, and then we just have to respond to that.
So we will get their comments before we take it to the public.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not too concerned about that, and I think it would be really problematic if they did tell us that we had to stick with this, because that's letting this kind of third party take over some of the sovereignty of the city of Montpelier. I don't know. I don't think that they'll make us stick with what's on the register and what it says. Which doesn't seem like to me.
Okay. So their problem again is that we have historic properties outside of the district, so they would want the district to match.
I think that's where CLG would come down,
Okay.
where Division of Historic Preservation would come down. But I think sometimes we've got to call the question on them maybe to see, are we calling their bluff, or are they really
Is it actually?
Do they
are they
want
really
it?
going to go and write a letter to the National Park Service and have us thrown out of the CLG program because, you know, we're protecting only 500 of our 800 buildings in the historic district, or whatever the numbers are.
I think if that does happen, I would love for them to put it in writing and to actually analyze what their rationale would be for that.
Well, that was brought up before by the Historic Preservation Commission, that
Yeah.
we could be in trouble with our CLG
Yeah,
determination.
they've made comments before on our proposals.
Well, maybe we need some time to digest this and bring it back next time.
Do you
With
have
the
a
map?
specific request of what, do you have something you'd like me to start putting together?
I would love to see the map that actually has the structures on it. Yeah, which one? What is it?
You guys have that one somewhere? That
Yeah,
one.
and, maybe, I'd like to see neighborhoods overlaid somehow. Maybe it'd be better in the big map, the red and blue map, but,
I'll try to print bigger maps.
because we kind of know the peripheral area, if we're just focusing on this.
So we're looking at neighborhoods and designated downtown and,
Neighborhoods meaning zoning
yes,
district, yes.
and the National Register boundary.
Boundary.
Thinking too, if it's all the same work, I think it would be helpful to have two different ones.
Two different maps. Okay.
One that's neighborhood zoning with designated downtown, and one's neighborhood zoning with the National Register,
Okay.
so that we could compare those two.
Sorry, what was your second one? Your second one was?
One that has neighborhood zoning and National Register only. Those two things.
Yeah.
With overlays. Another one that has neighborhood zoning with designated downtown overlays, and then we could compare those two maps with one another
Okay.
to see.
Sure.
Can the current boundary be on there too, so we can see, like with the, I wanna see the current boundary with the zoning, so I know if there's like a little section or two that don't quite match, that we could just say, oh, well, if we add that, then we're actually on the
Yeah,
right
it's
zoning.
probably just going to be a black line, so it won't interfere too much in it. So.
Okay.
But with the other layers would be helpful.
At least we could start to look at some rationales for whatever we might recommend.
Well, this one is this one current?
Yeah, I couldn't zoom into this, basically really kind of zoom right into this block and then have them print out a bigger map of the zoomed in area.
But this is the
This is the existing zone,
plus design control.
plus design control.
Yeah, so
Oh,
we
right,
have
so
we
we
have
have
that already.
That, but I think
It's hard to read.
it would be helpful to see with these other outlines, I
Yeah.
think, so that we can see how close this, what's that, historic district aligns with that. I don't know.
Seems like a plan. We can do that first thing next meeting, but we should maybe we'll devote the rest of this meeting for a quick discussion about planning our planning. Do we besides the boundary next week? I mean, I think we were planning to go back to the city plan. Does everyone want to do that? Yeah.
Discuss that. The boundary.
Basically, next meeting, we're not going to, in this meeting, we're not going to conclude, have a vote on the boundary, so we'll have to pick that up at next meeting. Is there anything else that we should do before getting back to the city plan? I mean, my thoughts are that once we get back in the city plan, let's get back into it, deeply and start being focused entirely on that. So I guess if there's anything related to this stuff that we want to do before we get back to city plan.
This is sort of ancillary to this map making thing. I'm a little concerned that, I mean, we can stare at these maps all day, and I think what might be beneficial is to have like a real focused discussion on what we want to achieve through design review authority. Because it's a little unclear to me what the policy rationale for determining these boundaries are right now, absent that discussion. And I don't know that we can have it right now, but
We had a bunch of that in this. These are kind of the rules, and they had laid out their.
Yeah.
This is the design review.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I
But there was kind of looking at both and then rereading this with an eye towards
Yeah,
that.
I think we really need to sort of. Yeah, I understand that, and I see that more as a kind of more of a process document than a policy document. Maybe that's just my view.
Well, they
Yeah.
inserted at the start a bunch of policy things,
Yeah.
a bunch of the whys. I mean, things I don't necessarily think I would have inserted in this document, but it was fine because it added context to what they were trying to do.
I think I know what you're getting at, and that's as a group, what are we trying to achieve with the
Right.
boundary? I think that this informs it in that, well, we know about how rigorous these regulations are going to be because we combed through them now.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that in mind, how much of the residents of Montpelier do we expect to comply with these? Weighted against how we want neighborhoods to look.
Well, and hopefully with the new regulations that have been written or proposed, that the public would have more confidence in the design review process than they have in the past. So we would have less concern about neighborhoods being included, because they would feel like they knew what was gonna be done.
And I think that's part of the discussion. Well, how does everyone feel about where the regulations are right now? I mean, my impression of them is that they're more detailed now. There's more of them to have to follow. There's some of the administrative process is now streamlined, and so it's easier in some ways for the small stuff. But in some way, you could definitely look at this as an expansion of what's being regulated.
Right. I mean, that's the thing is I think we've got to have a serious, pretty focused discussion, because I take your point, Barbara, but I'm assuming there's going to be some property owners that would say, oh, don't worry, it's okay. It's a 17-page document that explains this all now, and that it's going to create not necessarily confidence in the process, but it might do the opposite. So, I don't know. That's just sort of what's spinning around in my head as I'm looking at these maps. As I'm trying to grapple with what it is ultimately.
And I guess a
trying to achieve
little
it.
bit of what I would throw out for chewing on is we're working on all these things to come up with an idea that we're really this is just going to be an idea we're going to float to the public.
Mm-hmm.
And so in a certain sense we have some rules, we got a good idea, they're not cast in stone, and let's put together a map that's not cast in stone, and let's start to we're not sure if this is exactly what we want, but let's start to get some feeling from the public, because if we get, which was happened last time, 65 people in this room and 60 of them come up and speak against it, and that's what we got hit with. And we
Because-
pretty much came out and said, we can't do this. I mean,
Right, 'cause they were-
we'd be killing the entire zoning process if we try to pass design review changes, because, everybody except for, I could probably name the 5 people who came out and fit in support of the design control changes. And if
Part
we-
of the argument was that looking at past evaluations, they
Mhm.
felt that it was capricious.
Yeah.
And so now the commission has come forward with this document for us to look at and say, okay, there are more defined regulations now. So then as a result of that, perhaps the negative comments would not be extreme, as long as people understood it, as they understood that this was going to be much more clear, just like the rest of the zoning is clear.
That was the general concern last time. It was just
Oh, yeah.
okay.
That's-
That
And
makes
it was
perfect
people who
sense.
had passed determinations by various design
Oh, and they
review
were just-
committees. And, yeah, so
Very consistent.
very
Yeah.
Very
inconsistent.
inconsistent,
Yeah,
That makes sense.
so going for consistency here is important.
Which is why we had emphasized so much in the previous draft, very specific outcomes to go through and say, yes, you can replace your old windows with modern equivalents as long as you're meeting and matching blah, 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 blah. It's got to have the right shape, it's got to have the right number of, panels, but you can upgrade to modern windows, because what they had in the past was this person would come in and they'd be told, you got to take out your 38 windows and send them off to a specialist to have them reconstructed and put back together again and put back in. And then the next guy comes in and they're like, no, you can take your windows out, replace them. And so they were like, well, this isn't fair. My building's no different than their building. They're both historic buildings. Why did I have to spend all the extra money to save my historic windows?
And a couple of the discussions were based on what we were talking about earlier, that somebody was saying, well, I'm in the design review district, and so therefore I have to follow this. But my neighbor next door, who is also in the historic district but beyond design review, does not have to follow these. What's fair about that? So that's when it started to make more sense for those two districts to actually match. But
Yeah, or to have some line, and that was really all my opinion has been on this, is that we have some justification for whatever the line is. It's just, it follows neighborhood lines, or it follows the historic district, or it follows designated downtown. It's something that when somebody comes in to say, why am I in and my neighbor's not? Because you're in the designated downtown and they're not.
And we could also
And that's-
look at the zoning descriptions of the neighborhoods too, to use that to some extent as a rationale. Because some of the neighborhoods are identified as being particularly historic.
Historic, yeah.
Wanting to maintain that.
How do the sizes compare with the National Register map, historic district? and the current. Well, the current design review is quite big, right? So
It's
Well-
big in
It-
different
yeah.
places. I mean, this blue map is actually exactly what it is. This blue
yeah,
red
I'm
is-
just thinking about Barb's comments now about people who said that their neighbor was in the National Register, but not like they were in the red, but not the blue.
We had some up here up in Cliff Street.
Cliff Street.
Yeah.
So we had some people that were up here. So this guy was in, this guy was out. They're both,
They're both in the blue.
or yeah. Actually, in this case, this had people that were in the blue.
Yeah,
in
they were
design
saying, "I'm
review,
not
but
even
they're
in the
not
National
they're
Register."
not even in the National Register. But
And some people in St. Paul
yeah,
were in, some were not, so,
yeah, yeah. St. Paul was one because
Because the
yours
line
comes
goes
up,
right down the center of the street.
goes down the center of the street. So I'm
part
in,
of
but
it.
the person across the street
Right,
is not.
or,
I think
excuse
this-
me, the person next door to me
Yeah.
is not, yeah.
I think people have a good gripe when they say that I'm not even in the National Register area, but you're making me follow historic preservation
No, just design review,
regulations.
just design.
Well, if they're under as being proposed right now, if you're under design review, then you're under historic preservation design review. Same.
Well, it's more than just historic preservation, but,
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, I think that was what Mike was saying before, we could separate it into two sections, but I don't know if that gets more
We can
complicated.
do design or we can do historic, and they chose to do design and
Historic together.
together.
Right,
which
but not all.
doesn't make, in certain cases, it makes it easier if they choose one or the other, but when they choose both, then you're kind of like, all right, well, it didn't really help us. But I still think the rules, these new rules are more heavily weighted towards historic than the old rules. So it makes less sense to have
Mhm.
national life.
Mhm.
It's not
Mhm.
like it went the other direction where, boy, it used to be really strict historic and now it went more design review. If it was going in that direction, then, maybe, but it's,
I mean, the reason that National Life was included in the first place.
it's because it was in the Gateway District.
Ah,
It was that, there was a whole section on design review, and then they had these special sections for
Right.
Riverfront and Western Gateway, which at the time was called Office Park. And so they were included because they were the office park. Even though it still comes up, why does GMP have to go through design review? It's,
well, it is part of the
Well,
gateway.
it is part of the
we see
gateway,
it
but-
as we come into the city,
yes.
so I suppose, yes.
So, Barbara, you inclined to be supportive of a design review control district that's the same, more or less, as the red, the
As the National
National
Historic District,
Yeah.
in general, yeah.
That would be a shrinking of what we're currently regulating.
Well, but it's more properties,
Having a
it's
lot.
less area,
Yeah.
and it's more properties close to the downtown, but that's also where we're more concerned about it than we are with National Life's hillside. So, or with the college, which is still not, we're reviewing the college, but a, question comes up about how much we can actually have to say.
Yeah,
I
this
mean,
is
it's like the
college.
Capitol complex, we can't really make designations about the Capitol complex.
No, that's why it's in white on this
Yeah,
map.
so it's in there, but it's really nothing, none of our business.
It's a donut, yeah, we can't do anything.
So, yeah,
And there we can't do, there's like 0% that we can do.
0%, right, yes, because they have their own
Yeah, they have
regulations.
the Capital Complex Commission who reviews for design.
But I think we need a rationale if we're going to do that. If we're going to say that it makes more sense for the design review district to follow the historic district. And here's why we think that.
Mhm.
And, based on our neighborhoods that are currently excluded or streets that are split, that kind of rationale.
We can, and you might notice when we put the neighborhoods on there that, East State comes up like that, and then there's a separate
Yeah.
neighborhood for the college.
Yeah,
So we may,
it's pretty close.
it may be one that, like I said, we look at, it's not in the National Register, but there is a neighborhood up and around the college that is mixed-use residential,
Yeah.
so.
Yes, I think it would help to see that.
So, yeah, and like I said, we can always come up, we don't have to come up with one. I mean, we are gonna go to the public. It would be nice if we came up with a couple of alternatives and said, here are the, we broke it into 4 different options, and, we looked at all 4 options. A majority of the planning commission liked this option, but there were also members of the commission that liked this option. And now you at the public, we'd love to hear what your thoughts are. And they'll probably ask for something completely irrational, but
Much different, but as long as we can give them some criteria that we followed in order to make either one of those
and
recommendations.
and what's the benefits of doing it? And I think if Kim Cheney was here, what he would say is that the issue that came up last time was that there really wasn't a strong voice from Historic Preservation or HPC to advocate for design control and the value of protecting our historic structures. The HPC had kind of dissolved and hadn't really been operating for a number of years, and they kind of came back after this.
Right, as a
As a result of this, they reformed, they got new members, and they started working on stuff. So maybe this time when we go to the public, we'll have a group of people from HPC who might be able to go out and advocate for.
Well, they punted the decision to us.
They did punt on the boundary, but
Yeah.
at least they would be there to talk about the value of what they put together and why
Mhm.
they felt this is a better way to go, and this is why it's approved, and this is the value it adds to the community. And
I do take their punt to mean that they're ready to defer to the decision that we make. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
Well,
if they felt strongly, then
they
but
thought it was a
it
zoning
will be
issue,
going
right?
to the
Yeah.
public, and if they want to get this part passed, then they're going to need to have some. They'll have to take some comments on the map itself too, and they may punt at the public hearing on the map too and say, we don't care as long as whatever ends up being the boundary, we just want you to support the new rules for that area. And maybe they punt, maybe they don't, but.
I imagine if we had some sort of proposed change, they might have thoughts, though. Even though they punted on it, that doesn't mean they wouldn't comment on what we, I think they would still comment on what we sent, who changed it.
Yeah.
maybe not even with a unified voice. I think that they have different opinions.
Yeah, I think if they had a unified voice, they
Yeah.
probably would have. They just probably reached a point of figuring out we're not going to be able to within our HPC have a recommended option. So let's move forward what we all
Right.
agree on and leave this to the professionals.
And probably they felt it was more in the purview of the planning commission than theirs anyway. So left it up to us.
Yep. So, because we were kind of dealing with some other business, 2 pieces of information that are on mine. One is I'm actually going to be on vacation at the next meeting, but I can get you guys all the maps. I think I've said everything. Let you guys work on the map part. If you guys are okay with that. Otherwise, we'd have to reschedule for a different week.
When is the next meeting?
Can you
The
print them?
26th.
You'll print them up for us.
Yeah,
in
I'll print them
advance.
all up and make sure they're up here. I'll have Meredith drop them off. And maybe I'll see if she wants to attend just to.
Okay. Yeah, I think in light of that, maybe we can talk offline, but it's possible maybe we can have a shorter meeting and just handle the boundary issue and leave the city plan to connect back up with that when we have Mike
in
again.
September.
So is it likely that we'll have public comment though at that next meeting?
On the boundary?
Yeah.
I wouldn't think so. I would think we would want to decide on a couple of pieces. I mean, obviously, if anyone from the public shows up, they're always welcome to speak. But I think, at least according to our discussions, and maybe you weren't here when we had the discussions a few meetings ago, we were going to make a decision on the boundary. We were going to make some changes here, which Meredith and I have got to sit down and go over and go back to HPC. And then sometime later October, early November, we would put everything together and have a public input meeting.
I'm done everything.
Because there's not going to be an adoption of these rules quite yet, because they need to have some design guidebooks made, and HPC is willing to do that.
Before that's even adopted.
But they can't, well, yeah, it's kind of a chicken and egg.
Yeah.
You know, they really kind of need the guidebooks to go with the rules, but I shouldn't make the guidebook for the rules until I know they're actually something people support. So they're kind of in, let's move this forward, let's have some public hearings, let's go to city council, let's get some public input. If we know this is, people are comfortable with this, we can work on getting some more grants to do the guide. My impression was I didn't think they were going to go forward and adopt, although maybe they do. I don't know how you would enforce some of these rules, kind of leave some stuff vague.
Less vague
But-
than it is now, but.
Yeah, definitely less vague than it is now. So maybe they could just adopt them and then start to use them and then see where it goes.
There's no regulation that says they couldn't.
Yeah, there's no regulation that says they couldn't. But I think the idea was that we would make a decision here and have some public input in late October, November, gauge the public, see what they think, and then kind of move forward from there. But I won't be here on the 26th. The second thing I have before we run out of time is so municipal planning grants, you know, kind of the bread and butter of the grants that we usually get for working on stuff. Those are due at the end of September, which is actually surprisingly right around the corner. So there's usually a lot of interest in using this money for things. The city council, in last year's budget discussions, they were going to have a discussion about doing a facilities and kind of basically doing an energy plan around the facilities pieces. I'll have to get the rest of the details from them, what specifically they wanted. And they decided not to fund it through the general fund, and they said, but I think we'll just use the municipal planning grant to do that. So I just wanted to go and say that's what I was going to move forward with, writing the municipal planning grant on. You guys will have to approve that at some point if there's a push to do something else or find a different topic. But usually the municipal planning grants for updating zoning, updating plans. Would have been great to do the guidebook, but they'll have to do CLG grant for the guidebook. But we'll do this energy planning unless, you know, unless something else comes up, and if it does, we'll talk about it. But I just always need a window of time so I can write the grant, so I can get the stuff approved. So I just want to give you guys a heads up that that is coming up, but that I'm going to expect that we're doing the energy plan.
Seems worthwhile.
It just reminded me that so CVRPC just received a grant for our hazard mitigation plan update. Is that something that, how does this group relate to that process?
Historically, I haven't seen it come through here, but that's,
I'm the state reviewer for the plans, so I'm just.
yes. Yeah, we advised them
happily
that
be your
ours
stronger
was going
one.
to be expiring, I think, next March or April.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
what the date
early
is.
next
It's right
year.
there.
Yeah. Early next year was supposed to expire, so it was on our to-do for this fiscal year work plan. But usually they're working more directly with Bob Gowans, and yeah, I always appreciate when they do those for us because that's how we do.
Okay. Well, I'm happy to help. So.
Oh, you know what we forgot to put on there? We'll have to remind me to put on the RPC appointment.
Yeah. Okay.
Just so we put that on the agenda for next time.
All right. So do we have a motion to adjourn? Our time is up. So moved by Barb. Seconded by Aaron. Okay.
Aye.
And we are adjourned.
I will also not be at the next